Good evening. Good evening. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Erudition Network. This is the Erudition Network Interactive Black History and Knowledge Session, and I am Eddie Phillips. And as of every Thursday, I am here on Thursday evenings to go over uh, history, Black history particularly, is what we cover here on this program. Um, but I don't. It's also a knowledge session, so it's not just history. History can link into a lot of many different things. So we discuss a lot of different things here on this broadcast. If you are new, if this is your first time joining the broadcast or watching it, I welcome you. If you have been here before, watched it before, and got something from it, I welcome you back, and I hope that you again learn something again tonight as we delve into some history and other things um, that are of interest to us. All right, this program is on it a little later than what we usually for the most part for the last almost 2 years now. We have kept the program at 5 Mountain Standard Time, 6 o'clock Central Standard Time. However, due to many of our audience members saying that a later time would be more beneficial to them as far as their interaction and viewership, we have shifted it tentatively to a later time. Thus, the reason why I'm now on at 7 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, 8 o'clock Central Standard Time to facilitate and help those who would like to interact, but due to work or time aren't able to catch those broadcasts during those times. So I want us to be able to do that. Where are we going to go tonight? So there is a lot of things that are going on, I guess, that we could talk about tonight. I was hoping that we'd get a good amount of audience in here tonight because one of the things I want to do is, as always, open up the floor to those who are viewing and give you the opportunity to ask questions. See, because this is an interactive program, and I want to keep it an interactive program. I want to make sure that we are learning together, as I always like to say, that we are going down this, going into this history at the same time and trying to figure things out together. It does not benefit me to just sit here and bloviate to you and talk to you and for hours length, and you gain nothing from interaction, from your own questions and things that you may have, misconceptions of history that may have been taught to you, and the like. So I always encourage that you bring questions and things to the program so that we can delve into some of these things. So please feel free to ask questions, to inquire about what you would like to know from history. It doesn't matter what period, time, or whatever. Um, but I would like for you to just chime in and give me whatever questions or whatever things you may have or concerns that you may have about how history is being taught, um, put out here to the public. I have my own concerns, um, but I just think that it makes it a better program for us to discuss these things. So let's go forth with that. I'm just sending out a alert here. All right, I'm back. Um, to whatever you, Eric. Good to see you. You seem to be the only one in here tonight. That's all good though. People will watch later or whatever, but it's good to see you. I'm glad that you joined us. Um, I don't know, man. I keep trying to finesse and give people time, but I do think sometimes that we get very um little participation, and it's a little disheartening, but I'm happy that you're here, man. I'm happy that you're here. All right. If since you are the only one here, I open up the floor for any questions or concerns or things that 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 may need to be discussed. Um, and I give you the floor as the person that's in here tonight. If you have anything, if not, um, I have some things that I definitely wanted um, to talk about. I recently started to look back at some of the. You said you haven't heard much from Sudan. Well, there's so much going on right now, Eric. Um, Sociopolitically, militaristically, um, so many things that are happening in this world, and a lot of it is based off of ancient things that have happened in the past. Um, People just not really understanding the repetitive nature of how these things occur, um, and it's sad. It's sad that we keep having to go down this path, but it is what it is. Um, so I mean, yeah, I don't know what particularly you'd have to tell me particularly what you're talking about um, when you say um, the wars in Sudan, because that's been going on for a very long time, a very long time. Um, we can talk about what's been going on since 2023, but the truth of the matter is, the Sudanese armed forces and the issues that have been going on, there are a lot of people that have been killed, um, and it's sad um, about the people that have been displaced, the people who have been moved, the people who have been severely impacted. There is starvation, uh, food, water, um, the basic necessities being taken away. There are young men being pulled into these fights. Um, but though you bring up a very good point here, it just is another point of what we see with violence and war and interaction um, that just seems to keep going. It seems to keep going, and it's not getting any better. But the reason why I ask you is because the truth of the matter is, if you go back and you look even into the 1800s, right, when there was colonization being done in Sudan, right, there were people who were being set against each other, right? Rather it be from the British, rather it be from the Egyptians who had a great cause there too. It's just been a mess, right? So I don't know. That's why I said I don't know which one you're talking about. We can look at it from right now and we can say, oh, wow, this is horrible, right? And the humanitarian problems and everything that's going on. But it's been going on for well over 100 years, since the early 1800s. And then rather we go from 1800 to 1973, 72, 73, rather we look at 1983, 85, rather we look at um, the rebirth of it at independence in 2011, um, and then come forward. These are problems, and the problems seem to arise because we are infecting or influencing people with weapons and things that do not help them, and that is a major problem. I hope that answers some of your question. Good to see you, Phil. I'm glad to see you. But that whole issue with the Sudanese people um, is far-reaching. If you go back and you look at your research, you will find that this has been going on since the early 1800s. And that's sad. That's alarming. That's alarming. But it goes to show you the influence and the violence and the inequalities that have been put into that area. I remember last week I talked about how Europeans had split up parts of Africa, and splitting up those parts of Africa, what they effectively did is they had African people who historically had not seen each other any more than a tribal situation. They saw themselves now as whole liberating forces and people, and they looked down on people and they saw folks as less, not an equal tribe, not a tribe that was fighting for land or position, but now you made it more of an inhumane focus where now I see you as a cockroach, as something that is less than, and your life has no value. This comes from colonization. This comes from colorization, where we and culturalization, where we tell people that your culture is less than, right? And so then what happens is people start to fight against each other. They start to starve each other out. They start to take each other's kids. And now the war in Central Africa, right, is so violent, so culturalistic, that many of them, the 2 generations, 3 generations down, they don't even understand what the original fighting was about. And it is one of the reasons why you see people say, I am more Arab than I am African, because I don't want to associate myself with being African, because African seems to be something that is lowly. These are horrendous things. And it's a great question, Eric. And I really do appreciate you bringing it up. There has been legislation regarding anti-Semitic phrases or slurs. Why are there never any legislation regarding racist slurs? But there are. There are. There is legislation. I can't say that there isn't. It is now, and here's the problem: we don't put things out. Um, we don't put things out to say what is against the law or what can get you fined or jailed, right? Um, but the truth is that there are laws, right, on how to use, on what you do. Remember that case where the people drove around um, that young black girls' party? Do y'all remember that? They drove around and they were calling the people the N word, and they were very, very, very violent, not physically, but the way that they were throwing things out of the truck, and their approach um, towards this family that they were harassing. Well, one of the things they got charged with was inciting violence, right? Using fighting words, that's another form of it, um, and using racial terms such as the N word. Um, you can't you can't really do that because it is again a slander. But a lot of people don't know that, right? And so the problem is when we see laws being passed about anti-Semitic language or how we talk to Asians and stuff like that, we forget um, that there are laws on the book, right, that can get people put in jail. The violations happen, when we look back at. Here's the thing: I'm pretty sure very few people have gone and read the Civil Rights Act of 1964, right? And when you go back and you read the Civil Rights Act of 1964, you will find that there is a part of it that talks about ethnic slurs and how they constitute harassment and violence towards people, right? So it's on the books. It's defamation, it's discriminatory, it's all of those things. It's just the fact how many Americans know that. We fight for these laws, we protest for these laws, or our ancestors have marched for it, bled for it, died for it, but many of us don't take the time, and it's not a spite against anyone. But this is the reason why we have programs like this. We don't take the time to go pull up that history, to go read that. Simply read the law. So that when you read the law, you become smarter about the law. And people can't pull it over. Oh, well, I can say whatever I want to say. Hate speech is not free speech. But the only time we seem to care about it is when it's, especially today, when it's against an LGBTQ person. But hate speech of any type, right, is not, I won't say completely illegal, but it is a violation of the law, depending on what you do and what you do at the time. So it is something to consider. Colleges are clamping down against anti-Semitic slurs, phrases, and actions. Was there ever this level of clamp down on type of? Well, as I said, yes. If you go back and you go look at the Civil Rights Act of 1964, you go look at any of those civil rights acts, you will notice that there are sections in there that talk about the harassment and use of that language in order to harass people and harm people. Hey, what's up, Mike? Good to see you. Good to see you. Would that all fall under hate crimes? It can fall under hate crimes. So here's the thing: you have to understand legally, right? Legally, there is a thing called fighting words, right? And we used to know this because we used to teach civics back in the day. But the U.S. Supreme Court coined the idea of what is called a fighting word. A fighting word, it does not restrict your free speech rules. But here's the thing: a fighting word says that there is a word that you're using purely with the utterance and the desire to inflict some kind of injury on the other person. And I paraphrase. But basically, what it is you're trying to break the peace of that person, or you're trying to hurt that person verbally. So if you inflict a fighting word such as the N word on someone, say I walk up to you and I say, "What are you doing, ninja?" And that's the word I will use. But if I told you, "Ninja, get out of here," or if I've said something that tells you that I am going to enact an action against you, well, that is a fighting word. It is also a slur. So I can be charged for that, right? And I can be held accountable for that. There's a word for it. It's called offensive. You are offending that person, and we've taken the offensive thing to a whole new level. Well, I'm offended. I'm offended. I'm offended. Well, here's the thing: there is a specific law on the books, right? That's what it is. That's from the Supreme Court. When someone is using abusive language, right, to inflict harm, that is part of the law. I forget the actual case, but I do believe that the first name of the person was Chapsky or Chapscom like that. Um, but that's where it was established, and this is as old as the before the civil rights movement, like 1930, 1940. But and I think we've talked about that before on the program. Yeah, look, a fighting word can be used, right? Because you're trying to do something to inflict a verbal attack or show I'm going to hurt you. A fighting word could simply be I'm going to knock you out. That's a fighting word. It's verbal abuse. Exactly. It's verbal abuse. So we have to be very mindful of the words that we use. And this is one of the reasons why a lot of times when you see Black people and activists talk about how police officers get mad because someone cursed at them. Well, if they cursed at them and they said, leave me alone, that was not a fighting word. That's just, hey, listen, I don't agree with you. There's a difference. But how you inflict that, you have to be mindful. And this is why people get charged with certain things and they don't realize that, oh, wait a minute. But they under some of them, I won't say all, I've seen officers who have no idea what the law is, but some of them do understand that that's a part of the law. And that's why it's best to keep your conversation with police and authorities very, very PC, very, very business-like, and keep it business-like so that if they violate your right, that's their violation, not your violation. And that's the thing. But what if they start hurling insults at the police? That's the problem there. That's what I'm just talking about. We have to be mindful of that. Know what your limitations are. Go look at your laws. Go look at your laws. But that was a good question. I mean, we went from talking about the Sudanese into racial to slurs in the campus. Good questions, Eric. I appreciate it. I always want to open up the beginning of these sessions with you all asking questions because, again, I want this to be interactive. I want it to be informative, and I want you to grow. One of the things I'm only going to touch this subject very little. I don't really want to spend much time on it. I think um, Phil and Mike are going to talk about it tomorrow. I sat down today and I watched the very first episode of the Good Times reboot. And let me tell you all something. I am very I kind of see what's going on in television and in film, and it's disheartening and it is disgusting. And I think that what it is a reflection again of our history and of our time and where we are right now. What I mean by that is we are starting to see people again test the waters on what is stereotype and what is degrading and what is harmful to the community. Um, and we have to do a better job again because we've allowed that's a great word, grotesque, because we've allowed so many grotesque things into our culture. um People have now taken it upon themselves, writers who are just as dark and black as we are, and white writers have taken upon themselves to push narratives that have long since been proven um to be negative, right? To be negative. I watched some of it and I saw the different um stereotypes that were being used. And I said to myself, you would think that we would have learned to stop doing that, right? You saw so many of them. You saw, and I'm going to name some of them, and some of them may seem offensive to some people, but it is what it is. Um, I saw the docile, simple-minded, the Sambo characteristic, right? Uh, doesn't really have a good hold on language. Uh, Seems to gravitate toward anything that's negative and animalistic or simple-minded. I saw a lot of that. I saw the idea of the savage, right? The point of being where we are violent and we don't know how to stop our violence even at a young age, um even as babies. I saw that portrayal. I definitely saw the Sapphire portrayal of the stereotypical woman who is bossy, headstrong woman, trying to screw everybody over, cantankerous. Because I only watched the very first episode. I did not go any deeper yet to see any of the others, but I'm sure that we'll see Jezebels, and I'm sure we'll see um, drivers and sellouts. We'll see all of these different things. But the fact is that would be allowed. That would be allowed on television, and that in the heart of it, subliminally, you hear music saying black, I'm black, I'm black, I'm black, I'm black, I'm black, I'm black, over and over again, thus pushing the narrative, not to me and you who are African American or black, who understand that is not the whole of the black experience, but for the people who don't understand that, the people who don't aren't raised around black people all over the world, everywhere that Netflix touches, who will see that is the black experience, that is how black people act, that is how they interact with each other. They sing the cockroaches. They run out of the bathroom naked in front of their children, their female children. Right? It's just this push to allow make us be seen as less than what we are. And it's disgusting. And again, it's just another example of what is done to us as a people, right? To make us forget ourselves, forget who we are. I watched my sons yesterday on their show, and I was impressed with the idea, some of the things that they were talking about, because this is the things that they need to be talking about as young men. But one of the things that they kept pushing was the fact that I choose films that I want my sons to watch. And I choose those films and those programs because I know that they're going to be inundated with all types of foolery and bamboozlery. But I choose things for them to watch so that they can understand that is not the full understanding. And if we sit down to watch something that's full of foolery, I give them the historical understanding in the background, right, of what's going on. But I am often just appalled with how far we go, right, and allowing things to get out of control. And I just think that it has to be talked about. It has to be done. And, we they talk about different films that I've had them to watch, different things I've made them read. There are things out here, ladies and gentlemen, that you can watch that will better your time than whatever that is. Right? The film that came out about the magical Negroes that went immediately to streaming, because obviously black people, sorry about that, obviously black people aren't going to um want to watch stuff like that. right? They're not going to want to participate in things like that. So I didn't want to spend a lot of time on that. I know Mike and Phil, you guys are going to talk about it tomorrow. Um, but just from my background in dealing with film and screenwriting, I will tell you that it was on purpose. It's purposeful. And there's a long history behind it. There is a lot of people who glorifying the producers and moguls and folks who push this foolery every couple of years with the hope that you will drop your guard and allow these things in, right? We don't see, here's the funny part. If it were any other culture, and I'm not picking on this culture, but let me tell you something. If you were to film and put people from the LGBTQ community in a negative way like that, all hell would break loose. All hell would break loose. They would be on television talking about how horrible it is and all of this. And you would have folks saying, Netflix should, long time ago would have been taken off of Netflix. But here we are. And it shows. This is why when people get mad at comedians like Dave Chappelle and stuff like that, because they say that, you're not punching down on people. You're just trying to, make sure people understand that there is no equality here. There's no equality here. You can put whatever you want to put on about who we are and what we are, right? But yet you, certain people, you would never allow it. You would never allow it. So that is what it is. That is what it is. I'm gonna open up for more questions if you guys have them, and then I'm gonna move on to something else. But I'm gonna open that up to you all. If you have a question, historical question, anything like that, hey, I'm here for you right now to discuss these things. This is the time to do it. This is the time to do it. Eric, you asked two very, very good questions. I do appreciate it. I want this to be interactive, not just me talking to you all, but for us to talk to each other. So if you have a question, anything right now, please, please, please throw it out here. And I guarantee you we will cover it. My camera's getting ready to fall. Anything. Speak your mind. Speak your mind. I know it's a delay, so I'll give it a little bit of a second or talk until somebody drops something in here. I'm sure somebody got something that's been. If you read my book, yes, I'm going to say it again. If you read my book, you should have some questions. You should have some questions. I'm sure you looked at it and said, man, I don't know what he was talking about in this section. I think I do. Maybe I'll ask him, what does this mean? What's the purpose of this? Eddie, was you making this up? Any of that. While you guys are doing it, let me tell you something. I saw a post today about Zahi Hawass. You may not know who Zahi Hawass is. Zahi Hawass is the former head of the Egyptian Historical Society, whatever. He is the guy that for the last, I'd say 50 years almost, has pushed the idea that Egyptians aren't Black, aren't African. He is the one who has put out all of this stuff. So I saw a post on him today, and people were going in about how he's corrupted everything. But I made the point that he was told, I think it's been five or 6 years now, to step down. But yet he was pushed out of his position, and yet he's still being pulled in by the United Nations, by other countries to push this idea of non-Black Egyptians. So when you see that said, I want you to remember that name, Zahi Hawass, right? He's old now. Hopefully his influence will dwindle, but he's still out here. I think the difference is we accept it through other community doesn't accept that. What do you think will happen if Trump gets reelected? Well, I will tell you, um, purely on a um, historical side, Trump's big two presidents that he liked, and he made sure that everybody knew it when he was in office, was Andrew Jackson, right, and Woodrow Wilson. Now, what I find to be funny about, well, it's not really funny, but that's peculiar about both of those presidents is that they were very racist. They were very, very xenophobic, and that they did many things that have affected this country even until today. So, what I see happening is, again, this great push towards restricting the access for rights for different people in this country. I tell people you run a very big risk in voting in anyone who tells you that they love dictators or that they feel that people should be restricted. I think that I think he's a racist or a classist? I think that he's both. I think that he's both. And I've used this example many times because America is a stratified country where it has always been. It has been designed that way, where we put the people who have money and power, they are at the top. And the power and money can come from entertainment, it can come from politics, it can come from business, but they are the ones on the top. And they put pressure on everyone down under them, just as you would see in stratification in the way that the planet is. Well, over time, all of that pressure that gets pushed down from the top starts to crumble away at the bottom. And if done too often, due to classism, due to racism, due to sexism, due to whatever, what happens is there's a full collapse. We've had earthquakes, so to speak. We've had tremors. We've had separation. But right now, what we're starting to see is that the ground is giving way. The people at the bottom are completely pressurized to a point where they're just crumbling. And if the crumbling of that lower society, as they see it, goes away, what we will have is Rome. Your society cannot hold. Even the senators in Rome understood that the mob is Rome. The people are Rome. The Vox Populi are the people who keep us going. If they are not happy, if they are not satisfied, if we put too much pressure on them, they're going to collapse at all levels. And we're seeing that. We're seeing fundamental collapse. Was the Exumite Kingdom the first African kingdom to? I will tell you no. Because there is evidence that that's a good question. That's directly out of the book, Eric. I appreciate you reading it. But the Exumites, though they adopted Christianity, they weren't necessarily the first. This brings up an interesting thing, Eric, and you asked some really good questions today. One of the things that's been bothering me lately is that I feel like the Exumites, the Nubians were really before them, and there were other African tribes which were monotheistic. When Pastor Razor's book, if you guys have read his book, when he talks about people not knowing really yet what Christianity was or what It was to serve one God. They served a God. They just didn't have a name for him. They didn't have a name for him. And so what we see a lot of is that people were more likely to serve and become Christians, right? Or even to accept Mosaic law because of the understanding that they were already worshiping one God. But we keep being told that they were polytheistic, and they were worshiping multiple gods and this, that, and the third. And then there's this other lie that is put out here. It's called monolatry. Do you all know what monolatry is? I'll put that word in there. Somebody tell me if they know what that is. This is a huge thing right now. It's become more of a preaching tool, historical tool that people are using now, more than monotheism, because here's the thing. They can't say that Africans were worshiping multiple gods definitively. So what they're now saying is that people were into monolatry, right? They were, in other words, they knew that there were many, many gods, but they chose to worship only one. That's their way of, see, because it's okie doke here, the way of working it around, right? So what you say is, well, I'm not going to say that they were monotheistic. I'm not going to say that they worship one God and that's all that they did. Let's just say they had many gods and they just chose to worship the Hebrew or the Christian God because that's what they were told. Stop. They were always worshiping one God. There may have been people around you in America today. You may be a Christian, but there are Buddhists around you. There are Taoists around you. There are all types of different religions, Wiccans and everything else, people who worship all types of things. But that does not mean that though you have all these people who are worshiping different things, right? That doesn't mean that you were a part of that. That doesn't mean that you recognized everybody's religion. But this is what historians are now lying, and some theologians are now lying about and putting out there because they can no longer, because of the information that is being shared and because of the history that is being found, they can no longer lie. That aesthetic idea, right, which is a practice of self-denial, right? They can't do it anymore. So they have to come up with a different way to explain things. But be mindful. You will hear people tell you, well, they had many gods. They just chose to worship only one. Are you monotheistic? Are you polytheistic? What are you? Right? Don't lie about the fact that people were worshiping one God and try to find some way to work your way around it because you don't want to agree. But that's a good question, Eric. I really appreciate you asking that question. Anybody else? Hey, I just wanted to be interactive, man. Let me tell you something else that I saw. I saw something this past week about Cecil Rhodes. Does anybody know who Cecil Rhodes is? I mean, if you don't, you don't. But I'm asking that question. I want this to be interactive. Who is Cecil Rhodes? I will tell you, he's still playing a huge part in our lives right now. But let me ask you who he is. Do you know who he is? Have you ever heard of his name? Yeah, I type it in there for you. Because he's still, oh my God, this whole movement out here is a lot of it is based off this man. Anybody. Even if you could just say no, I'm fine with that. Nobody. Okay, well, let me explain it to you because we're gonna run out of time. Cecil Rhodes. Does anybody know what Rhodesia is? Oh, Alani asked a question. Let me ask this. How can the Black community come together and own more business and reinstate in their own communities? Where did we go? Well, I'm gonna tell you where we went wrong. It ain't from me. It's from W.B. Du Bois, from Dr. King, from many other Black historians. Where we've gone wrong is that many of us saw integration as a way to separate ourselves from our own community. I'll say it again. We saw integration as a way to get out of our communities and better other folks' communities. And one of the problems with that, Lonnie, is that when we took our businesses and we expanded and we were allowed to go into corporate America and to take these jobs, a lot of us moved out of our neighborhoods. We moved out of where we were. We stopped investing in our education. We forgot, right? And as we moved, so did some of the social changes move. Some people moved in communities that they were not allowed in before, and then those communities then became ghettos. They were redlined, then they were open in the 80s, and then we moved there, and now they're bad. Because in the end of the day, the idea of wanting better and maintaining better and demanding better equally has left us. Many of us don't do that. And so we see places where, look at Chicago. The south side of Chicago used to be had Italians and Irish folks there. Those communities were kept up. They had gangsters and people. You go back to the time of Al Capone, where those communities were kept up. But we moved and were allowed to move into those areas, those white stones and those buildings in those neighborhoods. And where there used to be a sense of community, even the gangs used to have a sense of community, we completely got outside of that. The money was being sent to where now the people who have moved out of the area, the white folks moved out into the suburbs, who were already given incentives after the 1940s because of FDR and the incentive programs that were given for them to move out in the suburbs and the different things. They were paying for their cars, help pay for their homes, and they were able to grow wealth. We did not grow wealth. We grew poverty. Everybody was working a job. You were told as young men, hustle, 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 hustle. And it's a problem. Y'all say y'all never heard of him. I will tell you, let me get to the Cecil Rhodes thing. Cecil Rhodes is the reason why you have a Rhodes Scholar. Bill Clinton was a Rhodes Scholar, right? And you ask yourself, what is a Rhodes Scholar? A Rhodes Scholar is someone who was supposed to go out and promote civic mindedness and white authority. Yeah, so it was white authority across the world. Cecil Rhodes was a billionaire by our standards, and he helped to promote that. He is also the creator of Rhodesia. If you don't know what Rhodesia is, that would be my homework for you tonight, right? I tell you to go out there and go look up Rhodesia and understand that Rhodesia was what is Zimbabwe and Zambia, and how he took over those areas and took the diamond mines in those areas. Now, why is that important to us today? Because Cecil Rhodes was a politician. He was a businessman. He was an imperialist. He had connections in both the United Kingdom and in America. And because of his push for this superiority of the white race and his machinations on Africa, right? And what he did, and taking the diamonds and taking the property and doing that. He was the prime minister of the Cape from 1890 to 1896. He was a very, very, very influential man. But here's the thing. When Africans took that land back, right? They've been taking that land back even till today. You start seeing people like Dylan Ruth, who went to Mother Emanuel Church and shot all of those people in the church. The Timothy McVeigh, who did the Oklahoma City bombing because he could not think about the miscegenation that was going on with young babies of white and black blood both being in a daycare within the Oklahoma City building. He said that. And it was all because both their theme was retake Rhodesia. Give us back our land. They even have a Rhodesian flag. It was being flown during January 6th when they all ran up onto the Capitol. Cecil Rhodes is someone you need to go look up. And I saw a post the other day where somebody praising Cecil Rhodes and his idea of Rhodes Scholarship. And it blew my mind. That man has been dead since 1902. And his efforts for the purification of societies are still going on. And many of our politicians and leadership are Rhodes scholars. And we don't know it. We don't pay attention to it. Eric, what did you ask here? What became of the kingdom of Saba? I see they declined due to trade. Is there any ancestral presence yet in Yemen? Yes. So we know that the Ethiopians greatly, the Ptolemaic Empire, there is still influence there. We still there. The kingdom as it stands may be gone, but the understanding of its ancestral place and presence is still there. Now, it is up to us to keep that history flowing. If we do not keep that history flowing, then no. And this is why it is so important, Eric, that we do our research and that we talk about it and that we keep things in open for us. Because when we don't do that, and we haven't done that, we start to lose this connection. History is a connection. And our failure to do that is why I think a major part, not the whole, but a major part of our problems in the Black community. If you go look up Emperor Haile Selassie and how their government was overthrown, and it's actually, I think we want to say 1975, and look at how that dynasty ended, but then also look at the influence that it still has in Ethiopia and its lineage from ancient time, right, all the way till today. It's important. That's an important thing to talk about. Good point. Is it true that we spend as much money in fashion and others in education? America spends a lot of money in education. We spend so much money in education, and yet we are still, it's funny that you say that, because we are still at the bottom of the worldwide list. We're not really at the top. In other words, what does that mean? That means that you can have an A+ American education and still be a D student worldwide. I tell my sons this. Yeah, you can be an A+ student in America and be a D student worldwide. So what does that, and that's because there is no autodidactic mentality in America. Our education system is built off a Prussian mentality of servitude, where we teach people to follow a certain mentality and conditioning them to follow whatever place that they need to fit into society. And we don't care if you fail out, as long as you understand the authority that is put over you. This is why in history we spend so much time talking to you about the founding fathers and the laws and everything else. And we don't really spend a lot of time talking about the oppressions and telling you how to be think empirically and ask who, what, when, where, and why. We are behind. And you won't know it until you go overseas and you go, wow, but I'm an American. But that doesn't mean anything. Right? So we have to do better at educating ourselves. When you sit down with other cultures, you should be receptive to what they bring to the table, not being so much ethnocentric, could not get that out, that you don't want to listen to anything else. We are behind. And we continue to get further and further behind because we don't emphasize the asking of questions, the furthering of knowledge. How do we gain? I keep telling my sons, reading and learning is not a punishment. We shouldn't tell kids, go get a book, go read. You did something wrong. Learning should be a fulfillment. It should be something that enlightens you. You should want to learn and grow from what you learned. We're failing to do that. It's failing to do that. So, Lonnie, I've heard that the Ark of Covenant, there's been stories the Ark of Covenant is down in Ethiopia, that it was taken to Ethiopia in ancient times. Don't know. Haven't seen anything conclusively. But what I will say is that God does not hide everything from us. Man does. Man does. And he does it for his own reasons and his own power reasons. But I will tell you, there's a reason why people still go dig up places in Egypt. There's a reason why there are thousands of dig sites in Africa, all the way into the East. There's a reason why people still dig up these places to validate and to verify and to possess those things that they know or have heard were there. And that's a good thing. We want them digging it up. Some people are honest and they'll be like, well, this is what we found. Others have not been so honest for centuries. They've lied to us about who and what, how culture started. They've lied. The last thing there's coming out of these last 2 minutes, last thing I want to talk about to you all, I put out a post. I think it was, it might have been on Erudition. I don't know. I was actually out today, but I put out a post because I ran into something again today that angered me, as it often does, because I get a lot of posts from different places. And what it was is, this is directly informative from my book, is that there was a post saying that scientists have discovered the remains of hobbit humans. It's on Erudition. I just pulled it up. Hobbit humans that stood about 3 feet high and lived 700,000 years ago in Indonesia. If you've read my book, you will note that there is a part of the book, right, where I specifically say that I'm not going to validate any hominids, specifically Homo floresiensis, right, which is what they call a hobbit creature. One, because I found it to be racist, right? And secondarily, because there's no connection, there's no validated genetic fossil connection between us and these hominids. So what's the biggest push that people have to make us feel that these monkeyish, weird-looking creatures are related to us? Well, I will tell you why, and I'm gonna say it. I've said it before. Every time we say we find a creature, a bone, or something that we attribute to being human, we remove the genealogy of human beings out of Africa. We say that we find a way to say that, oh, they weren't African, so life started in multiple places. Well, that is a lie. DNA has proven to us that life started in Africa, but that doesn't mean that there aren't pseudo historians, pseudoscientists who are still out here lying, just as the conspiracy theorist people on TikTok lie. And they put out these problematic things. And I use this example. If 1,000 years from now, you lived in a city area that had a zoo, and people went into the zoo area and they dug up apes. And they said, well, these apes look like they had similarities, hands and things to humans. But then you dig around and you say, but there's also human remains here. Well, those are two different species. You don't link those species together. But this is what scientists have done for hundreds of years now. And it's a failure. It's a failure on our part. All right, Lonnie, you have the last question. Is it true that they use the Suez Canal to separate Africa and make the Middle East? Yeah, well, even before that, right? Even before the Suez Canal. I mean, you can creatively say it now that it has separated it. But even before that, they had already separated it. I'm writing a new book right now that talks about the Middle Ages, and you will understand why Europe, right, did what it did and trying to get rid of the knowledge that came out of Africa. The Middle Ages, or the Dark Ages in Europe, was only stopped, right, because the Moors went into the Iberian Peninsula, into Italy, and they took their knowledge, and historians will tell you that it is Islamic knowledge, but they were black. They took the knowledge from Timbuktu and different places in Mali, and they took that information into Europe. Europe took that information, and within a generation, it became the Renaissance. A re-involvement or a reinvestment into knowledge. See, we're taught that the Renaissance happened in Florence and that these people just automatically, they went and looked at Romans and everything else. They talk about everybody else, the Greeks and the Romans, but they don't tell you about the Africans. They don't tell you about any of that. And so this book is designed, and I'm working on right now, is designed to start to put that together for you. And then it'll explain to you why Spain and Portugal decided to go to the New World, where we are. What led them to go there? What did they learn about? What maps did they have? The idea of gold, wealth, power. It is the same reason why many of them went further east. And they were barred from the east by the Japanese. The church people were actually killed. The Roman church, they were killed trying to convert people in Japan and in Asia. So we're going to talk about those things because those things need to be talked about. And we need to start drawing these connections. The Suez Canal actually does separate it now, but well before that, we were already being separated, already being told what doesn't connect and what shouldn't be there. So good. A good session, you all. I appreciate everybody who was here. I hope that you got something from this session tonight. Eric, thank you so much for asking these some very, very deep questions. Thank you, Lonnie, for your questions. Thank you, Phil. All of you guys, definitely kept this going, and I hope that you got something from the things that we discussed tonight, and took something from it. Go look up these people. Go look up Cecil Rhodes. Go look up Rhodesia. Go see how it affects you today, and learn from that. Go look up what Eric was talking about, the wars in Sudan. These wars have been going on for over 100 years. It's around 1804, 1805. It's nothing new. Go look up these things that we discussed tonight. Grow your knowledge. Look at the stereotypes that we're talking about on this Good Time show. I know that Phil and Mike are going to talk about it tomorrow. The Sapphires, the Jezebels, the Sambos, and all of these different stereotypes that fall into what we're being pushed on us again, to make our children and our families feel that that's what Black is. That's not what Black is. That's not what our culture is. So I'm glad that you guys had a great time on here tonight. Tina, what are you saying? Me too. Me too. Okay. Yeah, the Moors. I appreciate it. I really want us to start to grow our knowledge. Oh, before I get off here, let me tell you guys something. I'm going to take 2 minutes of this. We are going to start it's not a program. It'll be put out as standalone, but I'm going to start to get my sons to sit down, and we're going to go over topics. History will be some of it. Science will be some of it. ELA, different things that your kids are dealing with in school, but are not being given that African-American historical background to it, not seeing it in a way that we need to see it overall conclusively. So we're going to do that. I've already told my 2 youngest sons, we're going to go over their history, what they've learned, what they learn in school, and then we're going to expand. And then we're going to do the same thing when it comes down to science, because we struggle in our science. And we're going to do the same thing in our ELA, and how we look at these poems that are being given to our kids to read, and what is the historical connotations behind those poems. Some of those Shakespearean poems and some of those poems from the 1600s, they're not poems that were greatly for us. And we need to discuss those things that are being read to our children, and so that they have a better understanding of what the people who wrote those things, how they felt, and why they wrote those things and why they did those things. But that is coming up. That is something new that we're going to be doing on the network, and I'm looking forward to that. All right, I'm going to get out of here. You all have a great rest of your weekend, and hopefully, God willing, we will see you again here come next week for a new session at this new time. And I hope that we get more people to join us. I know it's later, but we did it later so that folks can actually enjoy more. All right. I've spoken too much. I'm getting out of here. I got to go eat. All right. You all have a great rest of your evening, and God bless you.